Okay, so to pick up where we left off, okay, we were talking about monogastrics and how they have one stomach or one compartment, okay. We talked about HCl and how hydrochloric acid makes it a favorable environment for enzymes. Mucus is to protect that stomach lining from that acidic environment so you don't get ulcers, okay. Pepsin is going to be that main component that's going to, its primary job is to break down proteins into the polypeptides, okay? But proteins aren't broken down all the way into those amino acids until the small intestine, okay? So pepsin kind of starts protein digestion, but it doesn't end up all the way down into amino acids until it gets to the small intestine, okay? And gastrin is another one of those things that enhances enzymatic activity. Okay? So the mixture of food, enzymes, mucus, etc., everything that's in a monogastric stomach is called chyme. Okay? Then it passes through another sphincter, the pyloric sphincter, from the stomach into the small intestine. Okay? The small intestine and the large intestine are actually going to be technically the most important areas of the digestive systems. Okay, typically you think about your stomach being the most important. Actually, most of the digestion and absorption occurs in your small and large intestine. Okay, amino acids, fatty acids, monosaccharides are all ready for absorption in the small intestine. Okay. And they go through, or they are absorbed through these villi, things called villi, okay? And essentially it looks like tiny little fingers, okay, on the entire surface of the small intestine, okay? They're finger-like projections that increase the surface area for absorption, okay? So just remember that villi are going to be finger-like projections that increase surface area, okay? There's a couple different types of absorption that occur. Passive absorption, sometimes called diffusion, is when a large concentration of something goes to a smaller concentration. Okay, the natural state of things is to be equal. Okay, so if there's a high concentration of, say, sugar, okay, in the small intestine and a low concentration outside the small intestine, the natural order of things is for it to even out. Okay. So it's going to just passive absorption or diffuse through the wall, okay? Active absorption is going to be a little bit different, okay? It's for typically larger type particles, and it's when the lining or the villi kind of engulfs the particle and transport it into the blood or the lymph system, okay? And energy is spent here, okay? Passive absorption does not take energy, active absorption does, okay? There's 3 different sections of the small intestine, which you might have gone through in your basic biology in high school or here at Northwest, okay? But the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum are the 3 different sections, okay? There's another valve in between the small and the large intestine called the ileocecal valve, okay? Kind of like a sphincter, but it's just termed a valve, okay? And then it gets to the large intestine. The large intestine's main purpose is for water reabsorption. There, at the beginning of the large intestine, there can be a few nutrients that are absorbed, but the main function of that large intestine is for water reabsorption. And then finally, at the end of the large intestine is going to be the rectum and the anus, which are going to expel any of those waste products. Okay? So that's the monogastric digestive system. Horses are kind of unique, and they kind of fit in between a monogastric system and a ruminant system, okay? And the reason that they do that is because horses are considered a monogastric until the large intestine, okay? Horses have an organ that sits in between the small and the large intestine, okay? And if you kind of follow this, okay, this is a horse's anatomy. You have the small intestine here. And there's this large organ that sits in between the small intestine and the large intestine called the cecum. Okay? So remember that cecum. Okay, a cecum's primary function is to digest hay, okay, or forages or roughages, okay. pigs don't have any type of a fermentation vat. So if you've ever fed a pig, you don't feed pigs hay, okay, right? You feed them corn or starches and stuff like that, okay? Horses can eat hay and grass like a cow, but they're not a true ruminant, okay? But they have this cecum, which allows them to kind of fit that middle section, okay, in between a monogastric and a ruminant, okay? Concentrates, if you feed a horse any grain, is going to be digested much like a monogastric, but anything that's left after the concentrate digestion, okay, which is going to be their grass and forage, is going to be fermented in this cecum, okay? They're considered what's called a hindgut digester, okay? So just remember that that cecum is going to be a large fermentation vat that's going to do those forages. Poultry, okay, just a couple quick notes on poultry. Poultry, kind of some of the unique structures of poultry digestive systems, okay, are going to be these four things right here, okay? Instead of having teeth for mechanical breakdown, they're going to have this beak, okay, so it's essentially a beak's purpose is to reduce the particle size. Crop is a unique organ for them, and that's a feed storage area, okay? There's one missing here, okay, but you can write it in your notes. A proventriculus, okay, a proventriculus adds secretions and acid, but does not grind, okay, so it's kind of like a stomach, only a stomach will do a grinding, so it's doing both mechanical and chemical digestion. A proventriculus is only adding secretions and chemical digestion. A gizzard is, again, another one of those mechanical digesters. It's going to function into grinding into smaller pieces. And finally, the cloaca is kind of a unique word for poultry urine and feces excretion, okay? So their kind of their rectum and anus are going to be termed cloaca, okay? So that's just kind of some notes on the poultry. So we already looked at this, okay, but this is going to be a horse's digestive system. Just remember they're considered a hindgut fermenter, and it's because of this cecum, this large fermentation vat to digest grass and forages, okay? Okay, so now we'll get into the ruminants, okay? This is going to be a cross-section of a ruminant animal, okay, or a cow. So if you were to cut this cow in at this dotted line, this is what you'd see for their digestive system, okay? And this is their rumen, okay? And we'll kind of come back to this, or kind of just remember this diagram to kind of notice and remember the size of that rumen compared to maybe the other compartments of the stomach. And this is all that big rumen area, okay, for a cow. It's a very large area. Okay, so a ruminant animal, okay, which is going to include our cattle, goats, sheep, you know, the deer. Deer are going to be considered a ruminant animal, but for our purposes, pretty much cattle, sheep, and goats, okay, are going to be our ruminants. Okay, the main thing I want you to remember is that ruminants have 4 compartments in one stomach. They do not have 4 stomachs, okay? So when you hear someone say a cow has 4 stomachs, that's not true. Okay, they actually have 1 stomach, but it has 4 compartments. And those 4 compartments are the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum. Okay, the rumen is obviously going to be the most unique, or kind of why that makes them a ruminant. Okay, it's a large fermentation vat with bacteria and protozoa. Okay, it's the largest of the compartments, and it's lined with papillae. Okay, which are essentially the villi from the small intestine, okay? The same idea, okay? It's a lot of these finger-like projections that increase the surface area for absorption. Its primary role is to digest cellulose and some of those complex carbohydrates that they get from grass and forages, okay? In the rumen, they also synthesize amino acids, as well as those vitamin Bs that we've talked about are unique to ruminants. So talking more about the rumen, okay, the whole purpose of the rumen is to eat rapidly, okay, and regurgitate that bolus of feed or chew their cud more thoroughly and re-swallow it later, okay. This is termed rumination, okay. rumination is a survival mechanism. Okay, if you've ever watched a group of cows, they'll go out and they'll eat as one big herd, and then kind of all eat rapidly, and then they'll all go lay down together and chew their cud together. And it's a survival mechanism where they can all eat as quick as possible and then get back to safety, and lay down together as a herd to maintain safety. Okay? As the microorganisms ferment feed, gases are produced, methane and carbon dioxide, and eructation or burping. Okay? If you've ever seen a cow, they'll burp, or they expel a lot of gas as well, and that's all from that extra gas from the rumen. There's over 20 microorganisms in the rumen, okay? And if you take a ruminant anatomy, you'll learn all about those, but for our purposes, just know that there's several microorganisms in there. The next compartment is going to be the reticulum, okay, and it looks like this. It's sometimes called the honeycomb. Its purpose is for mixing activity, additional fermentation area, and it's also thought to catch foreign objects. If you've ever heard of hardware disease, if a cow or something swallows a nail, or a staple or something like that, the hope is that it'll get caught in these little honeycomb things and not pass through the rest of the tract, causing more harm, and it'll just stay in this thicker walled honeycomb area. The next one's going to be the omasum. Omasum, in a different language, I don't remember which language it is, means many folds. This one's function is not very well known. The only thing that they can kind of think of is that there's a grinding action, or it does that mechanical digestion. And then the last compartment is going to be the abomasum. This is called the true stomach of the rumen. Okay, it functions much like a monogastric. Okay, this is where the digestion. This is the most acidic environment of the compartments, and where the digestion of the concentrates is going to occur. For ruminant digestion, excess microorganisms are removed from the rumen through small feed particles. Okay, so as it's digesting the feed particles, microorganisms will move throughout the system as well. Okay, and as those bacteria and protozoa kind of leave with the feed products, okay, they actually provide nutrition to the animal as well. There's a saying that for ruminant nutrition, if you feed the bugs will feed the animal. Okay, so actually your purpose is to provide feeds at the right levels to enhance those microorganisms, because they're good for the animal. And then actually the recycling and the digestion of those microorganisms is what provides the animal energy. Okay. There's a synergistic relationship between the animals and microorganisms. Synergistic meaning that it's a beneficial relationship. Okay. So these microorganisms are obviously the way that ruminant animals survive. Okay. And it's important to balance the types of microorganisms because it differs as the ration or the feed that you're providing changes. Okay. And then after the chyme reaches the abomasum, after it goes through the rumen, the reticulum, and the omasum, once it gets to the abomasum, digestion and absorption is similar to a monogastric. Okay, a couple more quick points here to finish up. Something that's really important in ruminant nutrition, which we won't get into much detail, but are these volatile fatty acids. Okay, these are actually considered waste products of fermentation of carbohydrates. Okay, and the three important ones are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Okay, so even though these are actually waste products, they're used by the animal as a major source of energy. Okay, so make sure and be familiar with those three. Esophageal groove. Okay, what about a baby consuming milk? Okay, esophageal groove is when a milk diet, it basically avoids the rumen, reticulum, and omasum and puts it right into the abomasum. It works through that sucking mechanism. Okay, the other compartments are fully developed and ready for use about 2 months in sheep and about 3 to 4 months in calves. Okay, but this is how their milk avoids the rumen and the fermentation. Okay, so you can take a look at these kind of in your notes. I won't ask you to regurgitate those, but make sure and take a look at those for the digestion process. Okay? Any questions? Let me know and be in touch.